Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, joining you now from the Washington, D.C. area, the nation's capital, as we reflect on yet another day of protests as well as the memorials dedicated to the life of George Floyd. And so I thought I would start tonight by coming here to one of my favorite sites, and that is the memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because this memorial means a lot to me, having watched him give a famous speech called I Have a Dream numerous times on video, where he talked about the brotherhood of man, where he talked about that one day our nation would have Protestants, Jews, Catholics, blacks, and whites coming together to say free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Yet in my observations of what's going on today, we still have a lot of work to do. But as Dr. King so eloquently spoke, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hatred, only love can do that. And he went on to say that we must set the atmosphere. We must set our souls and our hearts and our minds on the thermostat of brotherly love and kindness, reflected upon every man, woman, and child that we encounter. So some remarkable things took place today as I came here for a moment of reflection about the sweeping events we've had since the deaths, the tragic deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the list, as you know, goes on and on. And the point that Dr. King wanted to make, and he stated it over and over again, is that we must find ourselves at a place of being able to take a seat at the table of brotherhood, because it is there that we can feast upon the goodness and the mercy that God grants each and every human being. And so today, in tonight's show, we focus on the aftermath of the emotionally charged memorial to George Floyd in Minneapolis. And we will talk about how we move forward in bridging the bonds between police and the black community, and how we bridge the bonds and provide stepping stones to reconciliation and the hard work for achieving that between blacks and whites. Because all over the world, as the world watches, they are out in full force protesting the egregious and outrageous injustices that exist. As Dr. King stated, injustice anywhere, if it's tolerated anywhere, it's injustice everywhere. And we are standing in unity on this program to join forces with those who have aligned themselves to love, freedom, and peace. And those are my opening observations. Now, an interesting thing happened here when I came here for my moment of reflection. I stumbled upon the DC Police Department, including the chief of police of the Metropolitan Police Department. And he was here to talk to cadets. He was here to talk to fellow officers in the shadow of the King Memorial. Here's an excerpt now of what unfolded here this morning.
I was sickened by what I saw with the murder of George Floyd. I was equally sickened by the fact that there were police officers there who didn't stop it from happening. The reason that we assembled here today is, we've been watching throughout the things that have been happening across the country, but more particularly here in Washington, D.C. We're seeing the impact that it's having on our police officers. People sometimes forget that police officers are people too. A lot of the frustration that's out there about what happened with George Floyd is being turned on anybody who wears this uniform. And like I said, they're human beings. And so we thought it was really important that our police officials, our command officials, come down and share what they're personally feeling with as many people as we could get together in an impromptu manner. And when we decided on a location, we picked this location because Dr. King, who you see behind me, is a representative of how you affect change in our country. You don't affect change by breaking windows. You don't affect change by throwing rocks and bricks at human beings. You don't affect change by burning St. John's Church. you affect change. It's a little bit more difficult, but you affect change through peaceful protest, and that's what Dr. King stands for. That's what we expect to see over the next couple of days, and I believe that's the only way that we can get our country to move forward.
That's wonderful. How are things going right now in terms of peaceful protesting and the response? You and the mayor were upset at the fact that the president and Attorney General William Barr had brought troops in to quell a peaceful protest.
Yeah, I think you have to. No military troops actually entered the city. I think that the mayor did an incredible job to prevent that from happening. There was a request by the local government to have D.C. National Guard support. It's not uncommon when we have large demonstrations to have D.C. National Guard support. There seemed to be some movement by the federal government to amass troops in the region. But cooler heads have prevailed. The protesters have been exclusively and entirely peacefully over the last couple of days, and we anticipate it'll be the same throughout the weekend.
So let's stand together and bring some healing to not only the city but our nation.
I think the only way we're going to move forward is together.
From the nation's capital, you're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to The Kelly Wright Show. In Washington, repeatedly shouting chants of George Floyd and "I can't breathe," protesters here continue to let their voices be heard. They continue to serve notice on the White House, Congress, and the nation that enough is enough. They want to see a change in the way blacks in America are treated. They want the world to know that black lives matter. And not far away from the White House, recruits and cadets of D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department assembled at the memorial of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Police Chief Peter Newsham organized the impromptu meeting. They gathered here for their own reflection on how the recent disturbing events involving the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and a long history of other tragic events involving blacks and police have now brought into sharp focus among all people on the need to bring healing and change to the broken relationship between police and the black community. Sergeant George O'Brien Jr. told me that he and other officers talked to the young cadets about the importance of learning to treat all people with dignity.
The importance of respect. Wearing this uniform, just because you have this uniform on, it doesn't automatically give you respect. You already have to have respect in your heart and respect every citizen, every nationality, every race, every community, one at a time. It's not because you have this uniform on that someone automatically going to give you respect. You have to earn the respect. These young men and women here are in the police academy right now, so they're in the process of training. But at the same time, I can't do everything in the academy. 90% of this training comes from home. I was brought up in a house where, hey, I say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. We also tell you in the academy, yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Would you, please, may I help you? It's just about, today we're talking about respect. It was unfortunate what happened to Mr. Floyd. We went over that, we explained, we watched the video a number of times in the classroom. We're not that officer. This department is not that. It's not that. That's a very sad situation. And everyone can look at the video 100 times over and 100 times over. These guys know that you would not stand there and watch your partner do that. Right? It was something we used a word called tap out. You know, if you feel yourself getting a little edgy, hey, tap your partner out and like, hey, this guy yelled several times, I can't breathe, I can't breathe.
There's some good things that people.
And we were standing here today at the MLK Memorial. Hey, he fought for justice. He fought for freedom. He fought for equality. It doesn't make a difference what color you are.
Unless they call you
Beyond
out.
us, we have the Jefferson Memorial. Behind us, we have the Lincoln Memorial. So we standing here today on, I call it solid, solemn ground for a memorial that we fought for. a memorial that all of us fought for. So it's very important today that we talk about this and keep this topic going, whether you're law enforcement or not. The community need to know what we do and how we do it. They're not all bad officers. Yes, we have a few out there, but at the same time, every police officer want to help the community. And that's what we're talking about today. It just helps.
And while dignity and respect is a good starting place to teach the young cadets and recruits about how to treat people they encounter on the job, it is also necessary to find healing. So I talked to the sergeant about where does the healing begin? What does an officer have to do, and what do people have to do to achieve that goal?
Number one, through prayer and meditation every day. I tell everyone the first thing I do, I call it Pam. I have a can of Pam on my desk in my office, and I talk to my officers about this can of Pam. You use Pam to make it non-stick. Yes, people can get frustrated, people are going to get hurt, but you spray that Pam on you, not literally, but you spray that Pam on you and let it brush off. If you don't coat yourself with prayer every day, it's not going to happen. So that word Pam, prayer and meditation, that's what we all need every day. No matter who you pray to, bow to, or kneel to, we all need to pray every day. And that's very important. That's important for me. That's how I start my day. I might pray several times a day. At the same time, I might pray for that citizen on the accident scene. I might pray for that victim of child abuse. I might pray for that woman or that man who's been sexually assaulted. So we have to start off with prayer and meditation in order for us to heal. And that's me every day. So I'll take a knee for that. I'll take a knee for that in the morning. And this is what I do when I get up. I got to thank God for doing what I got to do every day. So if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here.
From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., you are watching The Kelly Wright Show. We're coming back with much more after the break. Welcome back to the program. So joining me now is someone that's been on this show before, and I welcome her back, is Dr. Colleen Hawthorne, and she is the author of a book that I really love called Vibrant Life Success. And Doc, I'm still struck by what I saw today with the police chief as well as a police sergeant talking about how they get through the day, how they're reflecting on this. We've seen the protesters, and in the wake of the first memorial based in Minneapolis for George Floyd, we now find ourselves at a place of questioning, how do we become whole again? And if we were ever whole. So how do we find that space called healing, as the police chief referred to, as the Reverend Al Sharpton referred to, as the George Floyd family has referred to, and as I have referred to repeatedly on the show, stating that we must take on a posture of hope to get to a place called healing.
Absolutely. Yes, Kelly, first of all, thank you for having me back on your show. It's absolutely an honor always to be with you. Of course, at this time, we are dealing with, unprecedented challenges, and really challenges that continue to mount, very serious matters. So but hope is always central. First of all, you have to know what you're hoping for. And in these times, it seems like at least most people, in terms of the healthy hope we want to have, is for peace, is for clarity, is for moving to a new normal in a healthier way, in a better way. When people say, well, we want to get back to normal, I always say, probably not, because the new normal, the old normal, was not so normal at all. So the first thing is really recognizing we're in a time of change. And so we have to have hope in able to do this and make these shifts that are upon us. The change is happening. So we have to do that with hope. And then we have to realize that this is a process. The healing is a process. And certainly we're dealing with multiple traumas, emotional traumas. And so interesting too, because this is happening on a global level. So absolutely, there must be hope in order to even go through this process in a healthy and effective way. We really want to see the change that we need in the world. And that's all of us individually and then collectively and globally.
And based on the George Floyd situation, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on, and in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic, and then based on the police chief and police cadets and recruits, they're at the base of the King Memorial looking for how to implement change and having the hope based upon King's perspective on life, which is to have a seat at the table of brotherhood. Give us some tips before we leave to let us know how we coalesce all this and process all this so that to ourselves now and to our children and our children's children, we implement a legacy of hope.
Absolutely. The first thing is always awareness, Kelly. So we have to become aware that these things are happening. We have to talk to one another. We have to talk to our children. Avoidance is never the answer. Avoidance creates more problem. Avoidance creates more contention. We're seeing that in the streets. Avoidance creates more dis-ease. Dis-ease meaning lack of ease. It also creates more disease. And so we're certainly seeing that. You know, we're dealing with the pandemic, that virus, COVID-19, but there's so many other viruses, right? Now we're dealing with the virus of racism. We have viruses of, toxicity. So the first thing is awareness and understanding, these things are happening. We have to address them. In doing that, it's important to have pause. It's important to not be reactionary. It's important to realize we are dealing with multiple losses and issues of grief and back to back to back. So when you're dealing with these things, we have to be able to pull back, pause, so that you can reflect, get still and quiet so that you can hear and get the instructions, get the clarity. I was really struck, you shared with me as we were preparing to come on, that the first thing you did this morning was go down to the memorial. And I know you have a program, on hope, and that you often start with in this reflective posture. That's so critical. And it's interesting to me that when you went down this morning thinking, well, maybe I'll be the only one down there. Who's there? The police chief, saying that this is how he starts so that he can hear clearly and properly and start the day in a manner where you've had reflection, had prayer, had meditation, so that you can be effective in going out to do the work that you have to do. So those things are key. And one other I really want to bring up is we have to get rest during the season. Rest is critical. Rest in terms of reflection, meditation time, still time, detoxing from all the noise, also sleep. It is critical because we're designed to function best, handle stressors best when we have adequate sleep. That's just how we are designed by the Creator. So when you're, tempted to, well, I'm going to stay up, I'm going to do this, I've got to do that. No, we're not going to make the best decisions individually or collectively. We're not going to really hear clearly what our instruction is and what we're to do. So I'm so pleased that, wow, the police chief doing that this morning, that you were able to capture that. So definitely awareness. We have to not avoid, we've got to deal with these things. And there are lots of ways to do that and do it in a healthy manner. Perhaps we talk about that over time. And then also realize the importance during these stressful times. You cannot stay on. You have to be able to pull back, rest, get that sleep so that we are our most effective selves.
Thank you. I hope you will come back and return to the program to give us more insights on how to manage through this crisis, how to not only manage it and cope with it, but to overcome it, not as a survivor, but as an overcomer. There's a difference. We can survive anything, but we have to overcome it, which means we have to become the champions of our own destiny to really change the course. And hope is at the center of that.
Absolutely. Kelly, I'd be honored actually to, anytime you call upon me, but certainly I'm available and to have conversations about this. This is so important. We have to have ongoing conversations. We have to have ongoing conversations where we have instruction, guidance, support, that allows us to get through this healthily in a higher way, and that's absolutely possible. I'd be honored to join you in the effort.
I'd be honored to have you, Dr. Colleen Hawthorne, author of Vibrant Life Success. I knew it was vibrant, and we want vibrancy in our lives so that we can live our best vibrant life now, even in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic and an epidemic of racial division. But we'll get through it because of that hope that you talk about and that I talk about, and so many people are actually relying upon it now for our healing. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
We're going to be back with more of the show after this. Welcome back to the program. So we've been talking about a lot today in terms of healing and finding hope in the wake of the memorial for George Floyd. And joining me now for our Strengthening the Family segment is George and Tondra Gregory. I mean, I really love this couple. I love them individually, collectively. Much love to you. Double high fives, George and Tondra. And look, yesterday was a very impactful day as many people gathered in Minneapolis there on the campus of North Central University to pay honor and respect to George Floyd. And what I saw was his family and his brothers and his sister, but the brothers and the nephew all talked about how much he impacted not only their lives, but the lives of others. And George, for African-American men and women and children, I think many people had to look upon that, and maybe they missed it, but I reflected upon that as a very proud moment for the Floyd family to talk about healing, to talk about faith, to talk about hope, to talk about love, and to talk about the legacy of George Floyd in moving the world forward to a better place.
Yeah, it's a sobering time still. And I think when we reflect, when we've said several times on your show that reflecting, remembering, and just bringing up and those stories of what we remember of people or good times helps to eclipse the bad times. It doesn't take it away, but it just brings forth the good, the light, and we need more of that in this country. I'm pretty sad. I've seen some people talk about his background as if his background mattered, that another African-American male is done that way by the police department, which is supposed to protect us. And so as an African-American male, as a father, as a husband, as an influencer of influencers, as we travel around the country, speaking on marriage and NFL chaplains, I've got a past. I've got a history. And if I was done that way in the media, I would hope that people wouldn't see my past and say, oh yeah, you see all these black people, they're like this. And I'm not saying everybody's saying that, but To me, that's what I woke up with this morning, just thinking, why do we justify things because of people's background when Christ came to die for us all? And so for me, when I saw them reflect, I think more families need to do a better job at reflecting. And so we choose as a family to reflect and to remember, to bring out photo albums or to remember good times, because we have to have something that gives us hope that those times will come back again, or that we have what we need in our memories to bring up and overshadow bad times.
Yes, I totally agree. Like, we can't, like, Christ did not intend for us to dwell in our past, but to be empowered by our past, to make a difference, right? That's why the testimony is so important, right? When we share our testimony, it brings hope that, oh, if God could bring you to this place from that place, then wow, I need that hope, and I want to turn towards God to do that for me. And sometimes people want to hold your past over you to keep you silent or to immobilize you and let you feel guilty or ashamed, which doesn't advance God's love in the earth if we all are condemned by our past and it keeps us stuck there. We need to highlight we're more than our past, right? Like, there's more to us than our mistakes in our lives. And we need to see the whole person. And we need to use that past as that testimony of where he was and where he is today. So I think it's powerful when we can highlight the big picture of a person's life and not minimize them to what their mistakes were in their past.
You know, Tondra and George, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is saddening and maddening that someone would try to denigrate a man and try to hold him to his past in order to alleviate their own burdens of being just as wrong in their past. And a lot of times when you're pointing at someone, you've got four fingers pointing back at you. And I spoke to an acquaintance, a friend of George Floyd yesterday, and no one's talking about the fact, as this friend talked about, how George was the kind of man, he wanted to help young people, even so much so as pulling out a portable baptismal to get young kids baptized. So, you know, if you're going to point fingers at someone, let's tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We're all sinners saved by grace. So what business do we have to be picking at the speck of dust in someone else's eye? We got a big old plank in our own eye. So I agree with you. But moving forward, George and Tondra, what do we say to African-American men who are fathers, who are brothers, who are husbands, or who are just men trying to be accepted and live their best life now without having a neck under someone's knee and without having to go through all this kind of scrutiny and marginalization just for being Black?
Yes, and I'd like to just add just a bit of my personal background, which is I grew up in a single parent home with a mom, and my dad was very absent from my life, and it made a negative impact. But by the grace of God, you know, which is that testimony, that God did redeem that for me, and that's another whole story for another whole day. But meeting George, us getting married, us coming from two different backgrounds caused us to struggle in our marriage, and you know, we might not be here today had we not learned how to make marriage work. But the power of that, to just fast forward, is we have two amazing kids. We've been married 25 years. Our kids are successful professionally, but not just that, they're good people who care about others. And I personally was able to provide a life for my kids that I did not have for myself. My daughter was able to see how privileged she was. A part of that privilege was having two parents in the home, and you know, two parents raising her together and pouring into her life with her self-esteem. And what she has learned is the privileges that she has been afforded is not something to be ashamed of, but it is to take our privilege and to help lift others up. And this is what can come out of when you pour into your kids and you shape their hearts and minds. You don't let them be ashamed of their past. You help them to build strength from their past. It's never too late to turn your life around and do the right thing.
Before I let you go, I want to just shift gears a little bit to Drew Brees and NFL players across the board now, including Drew Brees' teammates, are now stating to the world, Black Lives Matter. And Drew Brees apologized, and I think that apology has been accepted, but it also underscores the fact that NFL players can do more, be more, and say more, and that's exactly what they're doing. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think, again, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I think what's happening now is others won't suppress their opinions. And I say good for the teams. I was always a little conflicted somewhat with how that whole knee in the NFL started and what the end message was. But in the end, Colin tried to take a knee and protest peacefully. And then there's a knee that was also taken that was just to divide us. And so regardless of how we look at that, I think use your voice to speak, use your influence to influence, and most of all, use your hands to love. We don't want to tear anything down. We want to love, man. The NFL players that we know, their wives, the coaches and their wives that we serve, they want to use their influence. If you go to the Chargers Instagram page, you'll see that they don't, Coach Anthony Lynn, African-American coach, he just doesn't want to give a good post. He wants to be a part of a conversation and ways that we can make change. So I think the NFL and coaches and players, they're going to use their voices, not to just protest, but they're going to use their influence to make a difference. And that's what I'm so glad that we get to serve this community.
I thank you both, George and Tondra Gregory. Love you, as I always said. And we should tell people that more often. We'll be back with more of them on Monday. Hey, have a great weekend. And I look forward to always talking to both of you as we continue to move the ball forward and making the family stronger by strengthening the family. Thank you again. George and Tondra Gregory, their Journey for Life. Make sure you check them out. And also make sure you know that when their team starts playing, they're the chaplains in the background to help them go forward. LA Chargers, we'll see what happens in the coming year. God bless you guys. See you soon.
God bless you.
Thank you.
More of the show after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm about to introduce to you a good friend who I haven't talked to in a while. He's out on the West Coast in Los Angeles, to be exact, where there have been a number of protests going on of course, in the wake of what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis. But we've seen it all across the world. All across the world, people have been protesting, and some have led to violent protests. But Julio Hansen joins us now. He's an educator, an assistant principal, and just completed his doctorate in art activism. I'm so proud of him. Julio, good of you to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a big pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you and to see that you're safe and well in Los Angeles in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, and of course in the middle of the protests that have erupted in the wake of the death of George Floyd, but also Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. But you and I know someone very near and dear to us, and he is Lamont McLemore, the founder of the Fifth Dimension. And for those who may have forgotten who the Fifth Dimension are, that is an incredible R&B soul group that created and invented Champagne Soul.
You're talking about the 10-year-olds that forgot the 10-year-olds, because if you're above 10, you should know who they are.
Yeah. You should, because our music is still very popular.
Still on TV.
We're on TV, and this being June, the month of music, especially Black music, we want to pay a lot of respects to the members of the Fifth Dimension, and Lamont, of course, is a very dear, dear, dear friend of ours. But Lamont embarked on a campaign with you and in some way with me as well. And that campaign is he always envisioned seeing a billion people march against violence. And we're kind of seeing that in an indirect way because of what's unfolded here. But you were part of a song that he wrote called Ceasefire, Enough is Enough. And that's exactly what many people across the world are now saying, ceasefire, enough is enough. Tell me about the project and what it means to you and what it can mean to the world.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for even naming those three that you named. And those are three of the hundreds of young people, young Black people that have been mercilessly killed. And there's so many more out there that we could name. And so we speak for those in this song, Ceasefire. Ceasefire was, we did it about 4 years ago, and it's still so relevant today because it talks about ceasefire, not only around the world, ceasefire in other countries, ceasefire in our streets. And so that process, it started where Lamont came to me and says, I have this song that I think is really powerful, and I would love for you to sing it. And Lamont and I had already been working on a couple of other songs, more, love songs, and If I Could Fly, and some other songs. Yeah, we worked on so many other songs, and it was interesting that he came to me and said, I had this song that's so powerful. It's called Ceasefire. And honestly, when he first said that, I was like, wow, that's pretty to the left. That's another kind of a song that we hadn't worked on before. But when I saw the lyrics, the melodies just started coming to me, how their voices would be and how the feeling of it would be. And we worked with a great producer who is no longer with us, of course. So we honor him as well, Lloyd Talbert, who was able to envision all the sounds, and he knew my voice, and I knew his skill, his engineering skill and producing skill, and it just flowed, it just really flowed. The song itself it takes you from speaking of how the words ceasefire are so important. Just those two words can change everything. And so in those two words, we think about how we have people that are killed in Sudan, wars in Afghanistan, we have wars all over the world, but then we have wars in our street that right now, as you see in the rallies, we see that people are being shot with rubber bullets. Sometimes we need to just stop and just cease fire.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Ceasefire and have some dialogue. I like one specific line in the song where Lamont says, there is a weapon of mass destruction and it's easy to find. Just look in the mirror. It's us, mankind.
Yeah. Sometimes we are our own enemy. And really we're all, well, a lot of the protesters that are out there on the streets right now, we're all on the same side. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that we all want preservation of mankind, number one, and we all want preservation at this time of Black lives, because that's what's important right now. That's what's really important at this very point in time. What happened to George Floyd did not have to happen. Did not have to happen. Sometimes I wish someone had said, cease to that. I won't even name his name right now. Cease to the cop.
Yeah. Just
cease. Because sometimes you need someone smarter than you at that moment that has control of their emotions to actually say cease.
Julio, thank you. Got to come back on, share some more of your work and your development with the youth out there. I know that there's a lot that you have on your plate, and I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us about this particular project that you share with Lamont McLemore, founder of the Fifth Dimension, and certainly what you're doing with a powerful song called Ceasefire. And we're going to be sure to play that tonight in honor of those protesters who are protesting and demanding justice for the George Floyd family, as well as other African Americans who have been killed needlessly, it just should have never happened to any of these Black Americans who have perished. And we must stand up against that. to state that Black Lives Matter. Come back on the show anytime.
Kelly, I want to thank you. Thank you for this platform, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep going. I look for bigger and better things for you as well, and I hope that we can make sure that we can make a change in what's going on in our society.
Together we can. Thanks, my friend.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the show. So I want to thank everyone who's appeared on this program today, and certainly as we've watched the tragic deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many more things that have taken place that have been deadly and destructive to the Black community. It's important that we reflect on what Dr. King stated, that we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. My good friend Lamont McLemore summed it up in his song Ceasefire, Enough is Enough. He stated, "There is a weapon of mass destruction, and it's easy to find. Look in the mirror, it's us, mankind." Sounds to me like he and Dr. King and so many other people who believe in God and the sanctity of life and the humanity of life, that we can all come together and work through this divide that we have. Now is the time. Hopefully you've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading not fear, not hatred, not prejudice, but justice, knowledge, love, freedom, and peace. Have a good weekend, everyone, and as you peacefully protest over the weekend, keep one thing in mind: ceasefire. Enough is enough. Good night. God bless.
Words can hurt as much as a wound, but God's word can lift spirits to the moon. Ceasefire, lay your weapons down, free all the hands that we bound. Let's try negotiations, oh, not eliminations. Wars bring death and destruction, with peace and freedom comes construction. Ooh, let's have welfare and not warfare. No, no, stop using religion as an excuse. Stop using